You're standing beneath the earth. A faint bulb hums overhead, a tired circle of light trembling against a ceiling of rough concrete. Dust drifts in the stillness, rising with every breath, settling with every heartbeat. Around you, dozens of strangers sit close but quiet, shoulders almost touching, wrapped in coats that still carry the outside cold. The air tastes of metal, soil, and something older, fear softened into routine. Then it comes. A vibration, low and distant, rolling like a slow tide through the bones of the shelter. Before you drift off, take a moment to subscribe, only if stories told in whispers are your kind of thing. And tell me where you're listening from. How does this story make you feel, or which image lingers with you the most? You're listening to Echoes of War. You feel it before you understand it, the way the ground inhales, the way silence tightens. Somewhere above, the night sky has begun to move again. A woman near the wall closes her eyes. A man repositions his gas mask tin, the metal clicking against his boot. A child presses closer to his mother, face buried in the fabric of her sleeve. No one speaks. They've learned that during the Blitz, words are useless until the earth stops trembling. You listen, the way everyone listens. The first sound is not the bomb. The first sound is the warning. A thin, wavering whistle, far away at first, then circling closer, threading itself through the streets of London like a cold finger tapping at windows. You imagine it rising past shop fronts bordered against the wind, slipping between rows of terrace houses, brushing the slanted roofs of bakeries, pubs, churches, the Thames glinting under blackout silence. Here, in the shelter, the whistle arrives as a change in breath. People straighten. Coats rustle. The air contracts. Then the sky opens. A thud like a giant's footfall. A shock wave moving through the dirt overhead, through the rebar, through the walls. The lights flicker. A tin cup rattles on the floor. Somewhere above, brick and glass collapse into dust. But down here, the world holds steady. Not calm, not safe, just steady enough to wait for the next vibration. You watch the woman with the closed eyes. She doesn't flinch. She has done this too many nights to surrender the power of stillness. A new sound rises, quieter, more intimate, the soft scrape of pencil on paper. An elderly man sits alone on a bench, sketching the outline of the shelter door, the curve of a sleeping figure, the trembling lamp. His hand is steady despite the war beating at the ceiling. He draws not to distract himself, but to remember, to hold a piece of the world that hasn't yet fallen to fire. Another explosion rolls across the city, farther away this time, a muffled bloom of thunder. You can almost picture it, the orange flare reflected against the river, the spray of sparks drifting down like dying stars. Somewhere, firefighters move through smoke, their silhouettes rippling in the heat. Somewhere, in a narrow street, a row of houses is gone. You breathe in. The shelter smells of damp wool and ration tea. Someone hums under their breath, a tune you can't place, soft as a lullaby. It barely rises above the quiet, but it threads through the tension like a warm thread pulled through cold fabric. You look around. A young woman with smeared mascara holds a sleeping dog close to her chest. A seamstress from Whitechapel unspools a bit of thread between her fingers, twisting it into shapes. A factory worker with calloused hands leans forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the concrete floor as if it might speak. You can't see the city, but you feel it. All of London is holding its breath with you. Above the shelter, anti-aircraft guns fire into the night, each burst a brief flower of defiance. Searchlights sweep the sky in long pale arcs, combing through darkness for engines that sound like distant thunder. German bombers move across the city in neat, ghostly formations, their shadows sliding over rooftops, chimneys, and church spires. People used to run to the shelters with panic. Now they walk. War has become routine, and routine has its own armor. In the dim light, someone whispers a prayer. Someone else unfolds a newspaper to read old headlines by the unsteady bulb, pretending the news hasn't already been rewritten by the falling sky. You listen to the hush between explosions, the long, suspended silence that feels heavier than the blasts themselves. It's in that quiet that people imagine what the city will look like when the all-clear finally comes. Firemen hosing embers into steam, wardens guiding survivors through broken streets, neighbors emerging from basements to look for familiar shapes in unfamiliar ruin. And yet, even in this fear, something else survives. A strange calm, a stubborn tenderness, a belief that dawn will arrive, even if the horizon is smoke. You shift your weight slightly. The bench creaks. Dust floats. The light flickers again, but holds. You might wonder what courage feels like on nights like this. Maybe it isn't loud or heroic. Maybe it's simply the act of sitting here, breathing quietly as the world shakes, trusting that the earth beneath you will keep its promise for one more hour. Another distant blast. Another shiver in the air. The woman opens her eyes. The child adjusts his grip on his mother's arm. The shelter waits, the way a heart waits between beats. Outside, the night keeps falling. Chapter 1. Fire over the city. The night the sky changed. London had known war before, but not like this. You stand on the steps of an East End row house just after sunset, the sky fading into a thin blue that feels too delicate for what's coming. The streets are strangely calm, market stalls folded away, lamplighters gone, blackout curtains pinned tight as lids over tired eyes. Even the pigeons seem quieter, perched on rooftops as if listening for a sound they already sense drifting in from the channel. A faint hum reaches you, distant, mechanical, almost gentle. If you didn't know any better, you might mistake it for wind brushing over telephone wires. But the air is too still, too heavy, as though the city is bracing itself. A warden on a bicycle rolls past, his tires whispering over cobblestones. He calls out to a couple hurrying toward a shelter. Keep moving. Stay low. Not long now. His voice is steady, but his eyes flick upward every few seconds, scanning the sky. They all know what's coming. The first night of the Blitz had already revealed its shape. On the evening of September 7th, 1940, German bombers, hundreds of them, crossed the English coast in waves that darkened the late summer sky. Their targets were precise at first: the docks, fuel depots, warehouses along the Thames. But the fire spread faster than intention. Wind carried flames across rooftops and warehouses, turning the river's surface into a mirror of orange, reflecting a city that looked like it was burning from below. That first night, London changed forever. You look down the street. A group of neighbors stands in silence, watching the western horizon throb with a faint glow. Smoke rises like a slow, uncoiling hand. Someone mutters, "Already." Someone else says nothing, just nods. The hum deepens, flattening into a droning sheet of sound. Engines. Many of them. A soft breeze stirs the air, the kind that arrives just before a storm. You feel it against your cheek, cool and thin, as though the night is drawing one long breath. Then the sirens begin. Low at first, almost mournful, sliding up into a trembling wail that sweeps across rooftops and alleys, bouncing off factory walls and church spires. The sound is unmistakable, the city's voice calling its people inward. You watch the neighborhood tighten. Windows snap shut. Doors slam. People quicken their steps. And yet, in the middle of it all, life continues in small, stubborn ways. A milk cart clatters toward a shelter entrance. A woman locks her bakery door with hands that don't shake. An elderly man in a tweed coat pauses to straighten his hat before descending the station stairs. Even fear can become a ritual. The sky pulses with distant flashes. Not lightning, fire reflecting off the underside of the clouds. You inhale the cool night air, still untouched by smoke. You won't smell the burning until the wind shifts. Above you, the first formation appears. The first wave. They come in rows. Long, straight, disciplined lines, black silhouettes sliding across the twilight like ink strokes on a pale page. The Luftwaffe has crossed the Channel again, just as they said they would, just as London has secretly hoped they wouldn't. Heinkel he 111s. Dornier do 17ths. Junkers do 88s. Bombers that carry more than metal, they carry intent. You watch them move in near silence, as though the night itself is carrying them. Searchlights flare upward in sweeping arcs, slicing the darkness into long white beams. One catches the belly of a bomber for a heartbeat, smooth metal glowing like a trapped star, before the aircraft slips away again. The air raid wardens begin shepherding people underground. Come on, then. Quickly now. Move along. Keep your heads down. Last train into the Aldgate shelter leaves in 2 minutes. For many Londoners, the underground is safer than home. Tunnels become bedrooms. Platforms become neighborhoods. A city beneath a city. But some remain above ground a little longer, staring upward as if trying to memorize the sky before it changes shape. The anti-aircraft guns fire. Flashes burst along the riverbanks, on rooftops, from parks and open squares. The thump of each blast quivers through the street. You feel it in your ribs. You feel it in the bench behind you, the pavement beneath your shoes. Tracer rounds climb into the dark like burning beads on invisible string. One finds a bomber. Briefly. The aircraft wavers, corrects itself, continues. Bombers release their first load over the docks. Each explosion unfurls like a flower of fire. Smoke blooms. Wooden warehouses vanish in seconds. You imagine the cranes silhouetted against the blaze, long arms reaching into air that shimmers with heat. The wind changes. A faint smell reaches you, charred timber mixed with fuel. London's night has begun to burn. Those who stayed above ground. Not everyone descends into the shelters on time. London is filled with watchers, with worriers, with people who can't look away. In an attic flat overlooking Stepney, a young nurse named Lillian stands at her window, her rationed lamp turned off, blackout curtain half drawn. She watches the fire spread across the docklands with a heartbreak that feels both personal and shared. Tomorrow, she knows, the casualty stations will overflow. Tonight, she allows herself one long, steady look at the city she loves. On a rooftop in Southwark, 2 firefighters adjust their helmets as they pace the edge of their station. They listen to the whistle of the falling bombs, trying to judge where the next blast will land. The fires below swell like tidal waves of heat, and they know that within minutes they'll be running toward the glow, not away from it. In a tiny flat near Limehouse, an elderly couple sits side by side on their sofa, holding hands in the dark. They don't go to the shelters anymore. The journey takes too long, and the stairs are too steep. Instead, they sit together, eyes closed, counting the seconds between blasts. 1 long second is peace. 2 long seconds is hope. You feel the weight of these unseen stories as you stand on the street, the thousands of quiet acts of endurance that rarely appear in official histories. The Blitz is not just an attack. It's a catalogue of human responses to fear. The sky falls. You hear it before you see it. A whistling descent, sharp, slicing, unmistakable. People sprint for cover. You duck into a doorway, pressed against cold brick, breath tight in your throat. The bomb lands 2 streets away. A pulse of heat, a shudder of air, a burst of debris that clatters across rooftops. Glass shatters somewhere down the block. A shockwave rolls past, lifting dust and loose papers into the air. The ground hums with the aftertaste of violence. When you step out again, the street is changed. A shop-front window lies in glittering ruin. A lamp-post leans at an impossible angle. The sky above is smeared with smoke. And still the bombers come. Wave after wave. Hours of it. Firefighters sprint through alleys with hoses dragging behind them like serpents of rubber and metal. Wardens shout orders. Volunteers form bucket chains. The Thames glows faintly as flames reflect off its slow, steady water. London is not falling. London is enduring. And you stand with it, quiet witness, small against the scale of the night, but present. The dawn that didn't quite arrive. By the time the first light rises, the sky looks bruised. Smoke curls upward in drifting columns, catching the weak sun in pale amber halos. Fire crews shovel debris from streets still warm to the touch. Women sweep broken glass from storefronts. Men gather to lift fallen bricks one by one, clearing paths through what used to be their neighborhoods. The city feels stunned but breathing. A boy emerges from a shelter stairwell holding a dented tin toy. A pair of nurses push a cart of supplies across a sooty pavement. A cat wanders out from under a collapsed porch, tail twitching, unbothered by the destruction. You feel the ache of exhaustion in the air, an entire city whose nerves have been stretched thin through the long hours of darkness. And yet, above the settling smoke, St. Paul's Cathedral stands clear and whole, its dome rising into the morning like a quiet vow. For many Londoners, seeing it unbroken is enough to start the day. As the sun climbs, faint and stubborn, you walk past a burned-out warehouse where the smell of ash lingers like a memory. A single firefighter leans against a wall, helmet off, steam rising from his coat. He closes his eyes, just for a moment, as if asking the morning for mercy. London is tired. London is scarred. London is still here. And somewhere in the distance, the hum of another day begins. Chapter 2. Beneath the City. The Underground as a Lifeline. Descent into the quiet world. You move with the evening crowd toward the underground entrance, the familiar tiled arch glowing softly in the blackout haze. The street above is hushed, lit only by shaded torches carried by wardens. The air carries that faint metallic smell that London knows too well, smoke drifting from distant fires, mixed with the dampness of the Thames. Tonight, as on so many nights of the Blitz, the city feels suspended between two worlds, the one above, trembling beneath the falling sky, and the one below, carved from tunnels that now serve as refuge. You follow the steps downward. The temperature cools with each footfall. The soundscape changes slowly. First the hum of distant voices, then the scrape of shoes on stone, then the soft rush of air pushed through tunnels by the pulse of the city's breath. A violin echoes far ahead, bow drifting across strings in a melody soft and wandering. For many Londoners, the underground is no longer simply a transit system. It has become a protector, a gathering place, a temporary home woven from necessity and hope. On some platforms, families have chalked out small rectangles on the floor, claiming tiny sections of concrete as bedrooms. A warden at the bottom of the stairs checks the flow of people with gentle gestures, hand raised, then lowered, keeping the descent orderly. "Easy now," he murmurs, not to command, but to soothe. You step into the station proper, where the ceiling arches overhead like the ribs of a great sleeping beast. The tiles glow faintly under dimmed bulbs. People cluster in small islands, families laying out blankets, workers reading newspapers by the shaky light, teenagers whispering stories to distract younger siblings. The trains no longer run at this hour. Tonight, the tunnels belong to the waiting. You hear a mother humming to her infant, rocking gently on her heels. A man in a pinstripe suit removes his shoes and lines them neatly beside his satchel. A teenage girl leans against a pillar drawing pictures on scraps of paper, her pencil strokes soft and steady. You feel the air thicken with the intimacy of shared refuge, hundreds of strangers finding a way to knit their breaths together in the face of fear. Above your head, the muffled tremor of the first bombs begins. The tunnels become neighborhoods. The deeper you walk, the more the underground reveals its strange, improvised life. At Aldwych, volunteers have built makeshift libraries, shelves of donated books lining the walls, paperbacks passed from hand to hand. Someone has written "Take what you need, return what you can" on a piece of cardboard pinned to a pillar. At Liverpool Street, a group of women boil water on a small paraffin stove. The scent of tea drifts down the platform. They pour it into enamel mugs for anyone who asks. A line forms, quiet and patient, stretching back toward the escalators. At Bethnal Green, a string quartet tunes their instruments, preparing to play for the crowd. The moment they begin, the station transforms. Notes echo through the tunnels like a warm tide, brushing over blankets, over shoulders, over the concrete floor. Music becomes a kind of shelter within the shelter. These things aren't luxuries, they're anchors, little reminders of a life that continues above ground, even as the world seems to tilt. You pass a man in overalls mending a loose plank on a bench. He works carefully, not for himself, but for the elderly woman curled up nearby who needs the stability more than he does. Children chase each other quietly, inventing games with chalk and string, their laughter shaped into whispers. Parents keep watch with weary eyes that still soften whenever a child runs by. The underground's curved walls catch every sound, turning them into echoes of humanity layered over the distant rumble of war. Someone across the platform offers you a seat, patting the blanket beside them. Their kindness feels almost surreal, an ordinary gesture in an extraordinary time. And yet, it is precisely this ordinariness that keeps the tunnels warm. The sound of war from below. As night deepens, the air seems to press closer. The bombs above fall in patterns, long droning pauses, then sudden flurries of explosions that shudder through the ceiling like distant thunder. Dust drops from the rafters in a faint sprinkle. Babies stir in their sleep. Adults close their eyes tightly as each vibration rolls through their bones. A man with a portable radio adjusts the dial, its antenna trembling. The broadcast crackles in and out. Damage to the docks. Fires near Bermondsey. Fire crews responding. Stay sheltered. Someone asks him to turn it lower. He nods and does. People learn to read the sounds above, the way farmers once read weather. A long distant blast means the docks. A sharp, singular crack means a high explosive bomb. A rolling cascade means incendiaries finding fuel. When the sky goes momentarily silent, no one relaxes. Silence is where the imagination wanders, and wandering can be worse than noise. You tilt your head back, feeling the tremor of each impact through the tiles. The underground has become a giant ear pressed against the heartbeat of a burning world. But inside, conversation continues in soft circles. A woman tells a story about her cat who refuses to come in during raids. A man recounts a memory of playing cricket on this very street before the war. Two strangers share half a bar of chocolate as if it's the rarest treasure on earth. Even in this place, even in the shaking dark, humanity threads itself through every whispered moment. The sleepless and the dreamers. Near the end of the platform, you see a row of hammocks strung between support beams. Navvies who work the rails taught families how to tie them safely. A small boy lies curled inside one, fingers wrapped around a worn teddy bear whose fur has turned grey with tunnel dust. Across from him, a woman in her 60s unpacks a knitting project. Her hands move with practiced rhythm. Loop, pull, twist. The needles click like tiny clocks marking each minute of survival. She knits scarves for firemen, she explains to anyone who asks. They're in the cold all night, she says softly. Least I can do. A pair of medical volunteers walk the length of the platform with small lanterns, checking on anyone who might need help. A few people suffer anxiety attacks each night. Tightness of chest, shaking hands, the overwhelming weight of being trapped beneath a city that is burning above them. The volunteers speak gently, grounding them with kindness and warmth. Some people sleep. Some cannot. Some pretend to by closing their eyes, letting their thoughts drift into the noise. You find a small corner against a cool tile pillar. A folded coat becomes a pillow. The sound of the tunnels settles around you like a blanket woven from breath, footsteps, and distant explosions softened by distance. It feels contradictory, fear and safety coexisting in such a fragile space. But that is the underground, the echo chamber of human endurance. Small miracles in the dark. Hours pass. The trains do not run, but life moves. A midwife helps deliver a baby on a blanket near the tunnel wall. Someone hangs a makeshift curtain of coats to give privacy. Moments after the child arrives, a deep explosion shakes dust from the ceiling, but the baby doesn't cry. Instead, the tiny chest rises and falls in quiet rhythm, as if born already accustomed to the sound of war. A group of teenagers begins drawing pictures on the station walls with charcoal fragments, sketches of rooftops, of firemen, of birds flying through smoke. Their art is rough but honest. They sign each drawing with initials rather than names, shy but determined. A man stands up suddenly and begins reciting poetry. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear enough that those nearby pause to listen. He recites lines from memory, words written long before war, but perfect for this moment. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. People nod gently, recognizing the sentiment without letting it sink too deep. No one claps. Applause seems out of place here. Instead, the listeners give small nods of gratitude, each one a quiet handshake of the soul. Farther down the platform, a group kneels around a makeshift stove, warming canned soup. The steam rises into the arch of the ceiling and disappears into the night. They hand out bowls to families they know have been displaced. Plenty more, one says, even though there isn't. Underground life isn't easy, but it is generous in ways that peace rarely remembers. The longest hours of the night. You lose track of time. The bombs blur into background thunder. Conversations become low murmurs. Lanterns dim. Blankets rustle as people shift in sleep. War has its own kind of clock. Sometimes a heavy blast drops dust across the platform, and people jolt awake. A few instinctively curl into each other. Others hold their breath until the vibrations fade. You watch a man reach into his coat and pull out a photograph, a woman standing beside a bicycle, smiling. He looks at the picture for a long time, letting memory soften the sharp edges of the night. You watch a teenage girl carefully braid her younger sister's hair, smoothing it behind her ears. The gesture is tender, absorbing, almost hypnotic in its gentleness. You watch a volunteer warden nod off for a moment, chin dipping to his chest, before jerking awake with a quiet apology to no one in particular. You begin to understand something essential. The underground is not just shelter. It is a memory machine, capturing the essence of how people hold together when the world above them falls apart. The all clear. It comes slowly, almost shyly, not with a triumphant blast, but with a long, rising tone that seems to lift the air. People stir, eyes open. A few smile weakly. A mother presses her child's head against a shoulder and whispers, "There, love. That's the one we've been waiting for." The all clear doesn't mean peace. It means survival. Warm air begins to rise down the stairwells from above. A faint smell of smoke drifts into the tunnels. People fold blankets, tie shoelaces, gather belongings. Bowls are stacked, hammocks taken down, tea tins closed. Children rub their eyes and reach for parents' hands. As the crowd ascends the steps, the world grows brighter, hotter, harsher. But they climb anyway, together. When you finally step out, the sun is climbing weakly over a city that looks both wounded and awake. A street lamp smokes near its base. Soot drifts in the breeze. A fireman walks past with a face streaked in grey and sweat. A woman sweeps her doorstep, pushing fragments of her former windows into a pile. And yet, somewhere close, you hear someone laughing. A thin, exhausted, genuine laugh. Sometimes that is how resilience sounds. You turn back and glance down the stairwell one last time. The tunnels glow faintly beneath the city, still warm with the breath of thousands. Still waiting. Still ready. London will descend again tomorrow night, and the night after. But for now, morning holds the city in its fragile hands. Chapter 3. Ashes and Embers. Firefighters and the Battle for the Burning City. Into the firelight. Before you even reach the street, you smell it. Smoke, deep and layered. Burned timber, scorched brick, rubber, oil. It clings to the air the way fog used to cling to the Thames in winter. You step into the morning light, and the city appears through a veil of grey, silhouettes rising out of steam like monuments half remembered from a dream. The fires from last night still burn in pockets across the East End. Somewhere nearby, a wall collapses with a muffled crack. Somewhere far off, a church bell twists in the heat before falling silent. And through that drifting smoke move the firefighters. You watch them from a distance, figures in heavy coats, boots slick with soot, helmets glinting faintly through ash. Their movements are tired but steady. They step through rubble with practiced caution, listening for the subtle groans of walls that might fall, watching the wind for shifts that could turn a smoulder into a blaze. They are ordinary men and women with the faces of clerks, mechanics, and market porters. But at dawn, beneath the falling sky, they look like something else, like guardians standing against a fire no one fully understands. You draw closer. A crew from the auxiliary fire service adjusts the pressure on a hose that snakes across the street like a living thing. Steam rises from the pavement where water meets embers. One man's gloves are burned at the fingertips. Another's coat has a patch hastily sewn over a hole made by a flying spark. They don't speak much. They don't need to. Their silence is its own language, a mixture of exhaustion, duty, and a determination that feels older than the war itself. A woman passes them with a tin mug of tea for each. She keeps her pace steady despite the uneven ground. One of the men nods gratefully, sipping the tea even as smoke curls past his cheeks. You watch the way she moves, the way they stand, the way the flames hiss and the hoses tremble. This is not heroism as history often paints it. This is resilience made from soot and breath. Above them, the sun weakly climbs, turning the smoke into a pale gold fog. The Night Watch. To understand the firefighters of the Blitz, you have to go back to the nights that made mornings like this possible. You imagine the scene just hours earlier, darkness pulsing with flame, rooftops glowing orange, the sky streaked with sparks blown sideways by the wind, bombs falling, incendiaries raining like molten hail, warehouses igniting like lanterns dropped on dry paper. And in the middle of it all, the fire crews. They rode out on engines older than some of the men driving them. They pushed handcarts loaded with hoses and axes. They worked with leather helmets that had been meant for domestic fires, not entire neighborhoods collapsing in flame. Picture them running toward the blast, holding hoses that buck like wild animals, climbing ladders that shiver under the weight of heat, standing shoulder to shoulder in alleys lit by burning buildings. A single incendiary bomb could puncture a rooftop and ignite a fire that spread faster than breath. The crews learned to listen for the hiss that meant a magnesium bomb had landed nearby, burning bright enough to blind if stared at directly. They fought not just flames, but time. A fire left unattended for even a minute could grow into a monster that consumed streets. Some nights, they couldn't save everything. Some nights, they saved enough. You picture the moment when a crew rounds a corner and sees a row of houses engulfed, windows streaming fire, roofs collapsing inward like dying lungs. They don't turn away. They don't hesitate. They begin to work, because that is the only direction their training and their hearts allow. Above them, the bombers continue their patterns. But below, the city glows with a different kind of ferocity, the will to endure. Faces in the flames. You move closer to a team resting briefly near a smoldering wall. A young man kneels on one knee, removing his helmet. His hair is plastered to his forehead with sweat and soot, his face streaked in grey like someone carved from ash. He looks barely 20. His breath is shallow, his hands shake slightly. A senior fire watcher notices and places a steady hand on his shoulder. "You keep going," the older man murmurs. Not an order, a reassurance, a truth spoken softly into smoke. Nearby, a woman from the fire guards leans against a lamppost, wiping sweat from her brow. She spent the night on rooftops, stamping out incendiaries with a sand bucket and sheer stubbornness. Her boots are burned at the toes. Her jacket has holes where sparks kissed the fabric. She lifts her gaze toward the morning light with eyes that look far older than her age. But when a neighbor walks past with a tray of tea and bread, she smiles, tired but genuine. She thanks him, and he nods as if both of them are simply neighbors meeting on an ordinary street. Farther down the block, a firefighter climbs a half-collapsed staircase to check if the upper floor is still stable. Each step creaks ominously. He pauses, listening to the wood's language. Then he continues, steady and careful, trusting his instincts born from countless nights just like this. These moments, these faces, rarely make it into the history books. But here, in the quiet aftermath, they are the heartbeat of the city. You watch them, and you feel something settle in your chest. Not pride, not fear, something softer, perhaps gratitude for the resilience of strangers. The battle for the burning city. Night after night, London burned. Warehouse after warehouse, street after street, landmark after landmark claimed by fire, until the city seemed to wear a cloak of smoke as permanent as the Thames fog. On the most devastating night, the Second Great Fire of London on December 29, 1940, The city center became a storm of flame. Bombers released 100,000 incendiaries in a matter of hours. The streets around St. Paul's Cathedral glowed like the inside of a forge. The firefighters ran into that inferno. You picture the scene. The cathedral's dome rising above a sea of fire, shrouded in orange smoke. Engines pumping water from broken mains. Men silhouetted against walls of flame, their shadows flickering wildly. The roar of collapsing roofs. The shriek of metal heated to its breaking point. Amid all this, crews formed human chains to keep the flames from reaching the cathedral steps. Water lines failed, hoses ruptured, pump engines sputtered. Still they worked, relying on buckets when they had to. At one point, fire climbed the scaffolding around the dome. A small team climbed up to beat it back, hacking away wood, stamping out sparks. Wind whipped flames dangerously close. But they held. In the morning, a photograph would show the dome standing clear against a sky still red with smoke, a symbol of endurance. Many said London's spirit survived that night because the firefighters refused to let it fall. But in truth, the city's survival came from countless small acts. Anonymous hands, tired bodies, scorched boots, shared courage in the dark. You let that image settle over you. Men and women standing in a world of fire, refusing to move. The quiet between flames. Back on the present street, a brief lull falls over the fireground. You stand near a row of hoses coiled like sleeping serpents. Steam rises from cracks in the pavement. The smoke has thinned, replaced by dust and the faint smell of damp brick. A firefighter sits beside an overturned bucket, head bowed, elbows resting on his knees. His gloves lie on the ground, still warm. His breathing is slow, measured, the breathing of someone who has learned to be grateful not for rest, but simply for the chance to pause. A chaplain moves among the crews, offering words you can't quite hear. His presence is soft, deferential, as though he knows the sacredness of the ground he walks on. A dog, a station mascot, perhaps, wanders through the rubble, tail wagging weakly. Someone scratches its head. The dog closes its eyes. In a quiet corner, a fireman repairs a torn hose, needle and thread moving with surprising delicacy. He works as carefully as a tailor mending a silk dress. There is poetry in his patience. The fires are not gone. Hot spots still glow beneath collapsed beams. Smoke drifts from broken windows. The air tastes metallic. But the city is breathing again, and the firefighters are its lungs. The long walk home. Their shift finally ends. Firefighters walk back toward the station, boots dragging, helmets tucked under arms. The sun climbs through the smoke in pale circles. Passing citizens offer tea, or bread, or simple nods of gratitude. Some of the men and women accept. Some smile faintly and keep moving. All carry the same mixture of pride and exhaustion. You follow them from a distance. Their silhouettes stretch long across the pavements, shadows mixed with the ruins around them. Their coats smell of smoke. Their eyes carry the weight of all they've seen. When they reach the station, they wash their hands and faces in basins filled with warm water turned quickly to grey. The sound of water dripping from their fingers is startlingly gentle, like rain on quiet stone. They change clothes. They sit. They breathe. Some sleep. Some write letters. Some simply stare at the wall for a while, letting the silence soak into them. They know they will be called again tonight, and tomorrow, and the night after. You stand at the threshold of the station door, watching them gather strength in small ways. It strikes you that these are not warriors of flame, just people who learned how to carry courage long enough to make a difference. Outside, the sun burns through the smoke just enough to reveal the charred brick of a building that still stands, battered but upright, like the firefighters themselves. You take a final breath of the smoky morning air. Ash drifts softly, like snow that forgot its season. You might wonder, in a quiet moment, what bravery really is, and you begin to understand that sometimes it looks like this: a man or woman walking into fire, not because they are fearless, but because someone has to. London is still burning. London is still enduring. London is waiting for night again. Chapter 4. Shadows over the Thames. The docks and the river on fire. The river before the fire. You stand at the edge of the Thames just before dusk, watching the slow curl of water against the embankment. The river moves with a kind of ancient patience, broad, deliberate, a mirror of the city's pulse. Even now, in wartime, it carries the memories of centuries along its surface: merchant ships from ages past, coronation barges, whispers of fog-bound mornings. But the river is quieter than usual. No lamps shine on the waterfront. No barges drift freely. No crowds linger to watch the tide turn. Behind you, the docks are still, cranes motionless, warehouses sealed under blackout, stacks of timber wrapped in shadow like sleeping beasts. For a moment, you can almost imagine London at peace. Then the hum begins. It comes faintly across the water, a ripple of sound echoing between the warehouses. You feel it in your chest before your ears truly recognize it. Engines. Low, steady, approaching in swarms. The river reflects the last sliver of daylight, trembling at the first tremors of what's coming. You stand very still. Even the water seems to hold its breath. The night the Docklands lit the sky. On September 7th, 1940, the first great night of the Blitz, the Luftwaffe did not come quietly. They came as an armada. Hundreds of bombers crossing the coast in formation, their shadows blending into the dusk until the sky looked inked over by a giant hand. They moved across the river toward the heart of the docks, London's arteries of supply, the lifeline of a nation at war. The first wave dropped high-explosive bombs across the warehouses, cracking open rooftops like shells. The second wave released incendiaries, small silver canisters that gleamed briefly in the firelight as they fell. When the incendiaries struck, the world changed. Warehouses along the Surrey commercial docks ignited in seconds. Stacks of timber erupted like dry tinder. Barges moored along the quays burst into flame. Oil tanks burned with a roar that shook the metal rails. You picture it. Flames leaping from warehouse windows. Smoke climbing skyward in thick columns. The river glowing orange under a sky lit from below. Standing here, you understand why witnesses described the Docklands as a burning forest made of steel and ships. The river did not reflect the city that night. It reflected fire. The river as witness. You move closer to the water as the echoes of those memories drift across your mind. The Thames has always been a witness, silent, unblinking, enduring. It has carried Viking raiders, royal barges, factory waste, the hopes of immigrants, the ashes of kings. In wartime, it carries something different, the glow of destruction and the shadows of people fighting to survive. You listen to the gentle slap of water against stone. It feels ancient, indifferent, and yet strangely compassionate, as if the river absorbs the suffering of the city to keep it from breaking entirely. During the Blitz, firefighters pumped water from the Thames to battle the flames consuming the docks. You imagine the engines coughing, hoses trembling, pumps rattling with every surge. Men leaned over the water's edge, silhouetted against burning warehouses, pulling strength from somewhere deeper than fear. The river became a weapon, a rescue line, a balm. And yet, even as it helped save the city, it carried fragments of it away. Charred timber drifting like lost stories, soot floating like black snow, the remains of warehouses dissolving into the tide. Standing here, you feel the river's dual nature. Gentle and violent, protector and witness, cradle and grave. Workers of the waterfront. Not everyone could flee the docks during the raids. Some stayed because their jobs chained them to the waterfront. Some stayed because duty outweighed fear. Some stayed because the river had been their life since childhood. You picture them as the bombs fall. Stevedores racing along narrow quays, trying to secure ships before flames reach the mooring lines. Watchmen guiding crews across smoke-choked paths with lanterns held low. Lighter men navigating the river in pitch darkness to tow burning barges away from ammunition stores. One such lighterman, unnamed in most records, spent the night steering a cargo barge loaded with timber away from the firestorm, knowing full well that a single spark landing on the deck could turn him into a silhouette swallowed by flame. Another river worker stood guard on a floating crane, beating back sparks with wet sacks until dawn. He never wrote about it. He simply went back to work the next day. You might wonder, quietly, what makes a person hold their ground in such danger. Perhaps the answer lies not in bravery, but in belonging to a river, to a city, to a rhythm older than war. Fire on the water. The most haunting image of the Docklands is not the burning warehouses. It is the river itself catching fire. Oil drums exploded, releasing slicks that floated across the water. When incendiaries struck them, the Thames burned in bright patches, flames drifting like restless spirits. You imagine the scene. Flames skimming along the surface of the river. Smoke curling in strange shapes as water tries desperately to smother fire. Reflections flickering like torn pieces of the sun. Fireboats racing through the inferno, cutting lines through the burning slicks. A firefighter once described the night as looking into the mouth of hell while standing in cold water. And yet, amid all this chaos, the river did not surrender. Its currents pulled flames apart, cooled debris, guided ships away from danger. It held the city together. Even now, in the gentle ripple before you, you can feel that memory. A river that refused to let fire reign unchallenged. Survivors along the quays. Dawn reveals the survivors. You see them clearly in your mind. Dockworkers standing among the ruins, breathing the acrid morning air. Firefighters leaning on hoses, staring at the smoking skeletons of warehouses. Women carrying buckets of water to wash the soot from their doorsteps. Children picking through debris for anything recognizable. The docks look like the ribcage of a giant fallen creature. Cranes bent at strange angles. Barges charred to their frames. Timber piles reduced to black spines jutting from ash. But even in this devastation, life continues. A man repairs a torn rope as if preparing for the next day's loading. A woman carries tea to a crew of exhausted firemen. Two boys kick a dented football between mounds of debris, laughing in defiance of the night. You realize something. The river did not witness despair. It witnessed persistence. Sometimes that is a deeper form of courage. Night returns to the water. As you stand by the river in the present moment, evening begins to fall again. The city lights are dim under blackout, but the Thames still reflects the sky, dark blue, almost black. You hear distant footsteps along the embankment. A bicycle bell. A boat horn from far upstream. The water shimmers quietly. You think of the people who walked these quays during the Blitz. Faces lit by firelight, shadows stretching long across the docks, hearts pounding but steady. You picture the cranes leaning like silent giants in the smoke. You picture the river carrying ash away. You picture the firefighters dragging hoses across glowing cobblestones. You picture the flames rising, and the Thames refusing to yield. A soft breeze ripples the water. The river sighs, a long, slow exhale. Smoke from a distant chimney drifts across its surface like a memory fading into the tide. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear the echoes of fireboats, the rumble of collapsing warehouses, the shouted orders of a night long gone. The Thames remembers. London remembers. The river still moves forward. Night settles over the water, calm and vast. Chapter 5. The Heartbeat of the City. Wardens, watchmen, and the silent patrol. The men and women who walked the night. Before the sirens, before the fires, before the shaking ground and the falling sky, there were footsteps. You hear them now. Slow, steady, measured. A warden walks the length of a narrow East End street, his boots tapping softly against the cobblestones. His silhouette is tall in the dim moonlight, helmet catching the glow of a shaded torch. He carries a small clipboard under one arm and a whistle at his chest. A gas mask tin bumps against his hip with each step. He is alone, but not lonely. The night is his companion, the street his responsibility. All over London, figures like him move quietly through the darker corners, men and women of the ARP, the Air Raid Precaution Service. They have no weapons, no armored vehicles, no steel barricades. Only torches, whistles, notebooks, and a stubborn devotion to keeping order when the world above them turns to chaos. They patrol in teams or alone, depending on the hour. They enforce blackout rules. They guide people to shelters. They check rooftops for incendiaries. They stand between panic and calm. You watch him pause beside a terraced house, gently knocking on the door. A curtain shifts. A woman's face appears in the gap. "Your upstairs curtain's leaking light again, Mrs. Hughes," he says softly. "Oh, right. I'll fix it," she whispers back. He nods. She nods. The curtain closes. No raised voices. No impatience. Just the shared understanding that light, even a sliver of it, can be a beacon for danger. He continues down the street, boots tapping again. This rhythm, footsteps through the night, is the heartbeat of a city preparing itself. The call of duty in ordinary hands. Most wardens were not soldiers. Many had never worn uniforms before the war. They were clerks, shopkeepers, bakers, teachers, bus conductors, tailors, elderly pensioners, factory workers. Some joined because they felt compelled to help, others because they were too old or young to serve in the regular forces but needed to contribute. You picture them gathering at the warden post, a converted basement, a disused shop front, a room with posters of gas masks and fire precautions pinned crookedly to the walls. They drink tea from mismatched mugs, check their torches, pull on their boots and armbands, exchange quiet jokes that barely disguise the tension of the coming night. When the sirens sound, they move, not in panic, but with practiced certainty. Each warden has a district, a network of streets they know like the palm of their hand. They know who lives where, who needs help getting to the shelter, who keeps forgetting to secure the blackout curtains. Some carry lists tucked into their coat pockets. Elderly couple at number 12. Expectant mother on Cable Street. 3 children living with an aunt above the bakery. Widowed man who refuses to leave his home until the last possible moment. These names are more than duties. They are lives entrusted to them each night. You watch a warden knock on a door. A man answers, holding a trembling dog in his arms. "Shelter time," the warden says softly. The man nods, grateful. It's not a command. It's care. The streets under fire. When the bombs fall, the wardens do not run for cover. They move toward the danger, whistles shrieking through smoke-filled air. You imagine one of those nights now, the sky glowing red above the rooftops, the wind carrying ash through narrow alleys. The ground shakes with each impact. Windows shatter. Debris rains down from chimneys and eaves. And yet the wardens step forward. A bomb lands 3 streets away. The warden nearest you flinches, but keeps moving. His whistle pierces the tremor of the blast. A lantern swings from his hand, throwing long shadows across broken glass. He turns a corner into a cloud of dust rising from a collapsed wall. "Anyone hurt?" he calls out. Figures emerge slowly from the haze. A woman holding her arm. A man supporting an elderly neighbor. 2 boys coughing, eyes wide with shock. The warden guides them toward safety, voice calm despite the shaking ground. "Easy now. Follow the lantern. Keep close." Another explosion flashes behind him, lighting his silhouette like a negative photograph. He doesn't look back. His attention is on the people in front of him. Around him, other wardens appear, like small islands of order in a sea of chaos. One kneels to tie a child's shoe because the laces came undone in the rush. Another helps firefighters uncoil a hose. Another marks debris with chalk so rescuers won't trip in the dark. Another stands at a crossroads directing panicked strangers toward the nearest shelter. They are not soldiers. But in these moments, their steadiness is a kind of armor. The silent work after impact. The bombs stop eventually. Silence returns in strange, uneven pulses. But the night's work for the wardens has only begun. You watch them walk through the aftermath with clipboards in hand, lanterns swinging slowly. They examine craters, collapsed buildings, broken windows. They take note of downed power lines, blocked roads, destroyed hydrants. They chalk X on structures too unstable to enter. Help on rubble where voices were heard. Safe on houses they've inspected. They speak quietly with the injured. Help neighbors find missing relatives. Arrange for shelters to take in those who've lost homes. Escort medics through streets that used to be landmarks but now look like labyrinths carved from ruins. You watch one warden kneel beside a woman crying on her doorstep. Her house still stands. Her neighbor's does not. He stays with her until her breathing slows. He writes down her name, her address, her concerns. He does not rush her. He treats her grief as carefully as he would treat a wound. This part of the night will never appear in official summaries. But it is here that the city learns how to stand again. Looking after the lost hours. In the hours after a raid, wardens often walk until dawn. Their torches grow dim. Their steps grow slow. Their breath thins in the cold morning air. But still they check every street. You imagine their final rounds. Streetlights broken. Chimneys bent. Glass crunching underfoot. The sky turns from black to blue-gray, revealing the outlines of damaged rooftops. The warden you've been watching all night now stands at the edge of a quiet courtyard where a birdbath has cracked in half from the shock of a blast. He takes a moment, just one, to sit on a fallen fence post, rubbing a hand over his face. His helmet tilts forward. His shoulders sag. It's exhaustion, yes, but also the weight of what cannot be fixed. He looks up again when he hears footsteps. A woman approaches carrying 2 mugs of tea. She hands him one without a word. He nods, murmuring thanks. For a few seconds, they sit together, watching smoke rise in the distance. The city is damaged. So is he. But morning always comes. And these shared, quiet moments are what keep the night from becoming unbearable. The dignity of the invisible work. By late morning, the wardens gather again at their post. They lean against walls, boots dusty, coats streaked with soot. One writes a report. Another wraps a bandage around a scraped arm. A third pours tea into chipped mugs. Someone jokes, softly, tiredly, and the room fills with the kind of quiet laughter that comes only from surviving a difficult night together. They are not seeking medals. Most will never receive one. Their names slip through history like water through fingers. But their invisible work holds cities together. You watch them in their humble rest and feel a deep truth settle over you. Strength is often found in people who expect no recognition, in hands that guide rather than command, in feet that walk toward danger with no weapon but resolve. The street that breathes again. Afternoon arrives. Shops reopen where they can. Laundry hangs from lines again. Children play in alleys cleared of debris. The everyday heartbeat of London returns, not with triumph, but with quiet determination. And the wardens begin preparing for the next night. You see your warden standing in the street, adjusting his armband. He looks at the houses, the windows now patched with boards, the lamps repaired as best as possible. He watches a woman sweep her doorstep, a man mend his fence, a child chalk hopscotch squares over a crack in the pavement. Life returns to the street because he helped keep it alive through the night. You realize something then. Wardens do not guard buildings. They guard the rhythm of daily life, the continuity that fear tries to break. They keep the city breathing. As evening approaches once again, the sky deepens into blue-gray. You hear the steady rhythm of footsteps on cobblestone. Wardens heading out for another night of watching, guiding, enduring. You stand at the edge of the street, watching their silhouettes fade into the approaching darkness. They are the city's pulse, the quiet custodians of its courage, the steady beat beneath the falling sky. And London will need them again before the night is over. Chapter 6. Families in the Firelight, Homes, Loss, and the Fragile Threads of Everyday Life. A home before the sirens. You're standing inside a small terraced house in the East End, the kind built long before telephones were common and back gardens were small squares of earth framed by leaning fences. The evening light filters through the blackout curtains, thin lines of gold slipping around the edges like secrets trying to escape. The house is quiet, but lived in. A kettle sits warm on the stovetop. A radio murmurs under a wool blanket to hide its glow. Clothes are drying on a line stretched above the hearth. A half-sewn dress rests on the table beside a thimble. A woman sits on the sofa, darning socks with slow, practiced motions. Her husband reads the evening paper, though neither of them is truly reading. Their attention drifts upward now and then, to a sky they can't see. In the corner, a child builds a castle from wooden blocks. Each tower leans slightly to one side, a small imitation of the leaning chimneys outside. It looks peaceful, if you don't listen too carefully. But beneath the muffled quiet lies a tension held like breath. The house has endured many nights like this, and the family has learned to live in the pauses between danger. You watch them move through their routines, small rituals of normalcy. The mother folding blankets. The father checking the windows for gaps in the blackout. The child arranging the blocks in neat patterns of pretend safety. In this room you see what the Blitz truly threatened, not just buildings, but the fragile architecture of family life. The sudden descent into fear. The siren begins without warning, a low, wavering cry that rises through the air like a wounded animal. The child freezes mid-play, block in hand. The mother's needle stops. The father folds the paper carefully, as though neatness could protect them. They move quickly, but not frantically. They've done this too many nights to let panic lead the way. The mother gathers blankets and coats. The father slides the blackout curtain tighter. The child clutches a small stuffed rabbit. "Come along, love," the mother whispers, her voice steady. They step into the backyard, where the Anderson shelter waits half buried in the earth. Corrugated steel bent into a half-moon, reinforced with sandbags, covered in dirt and stubborn tufts of grass. A vegetable patch grows beside it, carrots, potatoes, cabbage, which the family tends by day and passes by in haste at night. The shelter door creaks as the father opens it. Cool air rises from the narrow entrance. Inside, the space is cramped. 3 benches, 2 lanterns, a tin of biscuits, a few books, a pack of playing cards. They settle inside as the sirens grow louder. The child sits between the parents, holding both their hands. You hear the distant engines, that dull, rolling hum that becomes intimately known on nights like this. The first explosions are faint, like someone dropping heavy crates far away. But they grow closer with each passing minute. The mother holds the child tighter. The father rubs his thumb against her shoulder. They say very little. In the tremors of the shelter, you see the shape of fear shared silently. This is what the world above does not see. Families shrinking themselves into small spaces, breathing through the shaking earth, waiting for the moment when night decides their fate. The house that holds memory. For every family who makes it to the shelter in time, another stays at home, too far, too frail, too stubborn, or too hopeful to leave. You picture an elderly man sitting by his fireplace, cane leaning against the mantel. His hands rest on his knees, veins rising like threads beneath thin skin. He listens to the sirens, but does not move. His wife has passed. His children are grown and far away. The house is his last anchor. He whispers to the crackling coals, "If it's coming for me, it can find me here." He doesn't mean it bravely. He means it honestly. Some families gather under stairwells, the strongest part of the house. Blankets wrapped around shoulders, chairs pulled close together, radios muffled beneath cushions. A single candle flickers on a saucer. When the first blast hits the neighborhood, dust drifts down from the rafters. A girl clings to her brother. A mother prays without sound. A father tries to smile for his children, though his hands tremble too much to hide it. Homes were supposed to be strong, safe, permanent. The Blitz changed the definition of a home from a structure to a feeling, from walls to arms, from rooms to breaths shared in darkness. What gets saved in a hurry? When the sirens sound, families don't have time to collect everything. They take what matters most. You imagine a woman gathering her wedding ring, a locket with a faded photograph, a letter she received before the war. A father lifting a cradle with both arms, though he knows the child will outgrow it soon. A child grabbing a tin containing marbles, sorting through them instinctively, choosing the ones with patterns that remind him of summer. People pack quickly. Blankets, a thermos of tea, a small Bible, a folded newspaper from the day peace was declared in the last war, a knitted scarf made by someone now gone. Some families pack a single teacup from a grandmother. Some take a harmonica. Some take nothing at all, choosing instead to trust that the house will still be there in the morning. One woman carries a vase, empty, chipped, because it belonged to her mother. When asked why, she simply whispers, "It's the only thing she left me." These objects become tether points, anchors to a normal life that war keeps threatening to wash away. In shelters across the city, these small items rest beside their owners like fragile companions. The fire that takes and the fire that spares. The bombs fall closer now. You hear them through the earth. Sharp, cracking detonations followed by a long, rolling rumble. Inside the shelter, the child presses the stuffed rabbit to her cheek. The mother closes her eyes. The father listens for patterns, trying to guess distance, direction, the odds. And then, a sound different from all the others. A deep, sudden thud, followed by a hollow tremor. The house above has been struck. You feel the shelter vibrate. Dust drifts down. The parents exchange a glance, a brief moment of shared dread. When the all-clear comes, hours later, the family emerges into a world changed. The house is still standing, but altered like a memory half erased. Windows shattered. Roof tiles scattered across the yard. The kitchen door blown inward. Inside, the wooden blocks lie in heaps of dust. The sewing table is overturned. The kettle lies dented on the floor. But the walls remain. And that is enough. They sweep slowly. They collect shards. They repair what they can. Other families are not as fortunate. A row of houses down the street has collapsed into a jagged mound of brick and timber. Firemen search for survivors. The air smells of ash and wet smoke. A woman stands barefoot in her nightdress, staring at the ruins of her home without blinking. A warden wraps a blanket around her shoulders. She doesn't feel it. The loss is too large. The night took too much. You watch her face, numb, blank, stunned. She whispers the name of her daughter, once, twice, 3 times. That is the truest memory of the Blitz. Not just destruction, but longing. For safety, for people, for yesterday. The small resurrections of morning. Morning reveals what night has broken. Families step outside to see which pieces of their lives remain. A teacup somehow intact. A photograph found in a pile of rubble. A child's book opened to a random page. A single chair standing upright among the wreckage. Neighbors gather, quietly offering help. Someone hands bread to a family with soot on their faces. Someone else carries buckets of water from a nearby pump. Children pick through safe piles for toys, squealing when they find something recognizable. And in the midst of ruin, small acts of grace emerge. A mother finds a surviving drawing taped to the wall. A crooked sun drawn by her daughter weeks ago. She presses it to her chest as if holding her child's heartbeat. A man discovers his wife's knitting intact, the half-finished scarf still on the needles. He sits on a doorstep and finishes a row with trembling hands, as though continuing her work keeps her spirit near. A child finds her stuffed rabbit in the yard, ears scorched but body whole. She hugs it fiercely. These fragments of survival become symbols of defiance. Londoners learn that even broken things can be carried forward. The evening rituals that keep families whole. By dusk, routines begin again, as if the city refuses to let war dictate its rhythm. Women wash soot from windowsills. Men patch cracks in walls with salvaged bricks. Children draw chalk flowers on pavement still stained with ash. Families sit down for simple meals. Potatoes, tea, whatever remained unharmed. The food tastes smoky, but it is shared, and sharing makes anything bearable. The radio crackles with familiar voices. Newsreaders speak with calm tones, and families lean closer as if the steadiness of the voice can stitch their hearts. The mother sews again. The father checks the blackout cloth. The child builds a new castle, one tower higher than before, and when the sirens sound again, they gather their blankets, take each other's hands, and descend into the earth once more, not because they are fearless, but because family is a thread, thin, fragile, unbreakable in spirit, that must be protected each night the sky falls. As the family settles into the shelter once more, you watch the lantern flicker gently across their faces. The child sleeps against the mother's shoulder. The father keeps one hand on the door, listening. Their breaths sync with the distant hum of engines, a small, trembling harmony, against a world that trembles more violently above them. This is what endured during the Blitz. The fragile, stubborn, luminous threads of family, not untouched, but unbroken. Chapter 7. The Invisible Front. Nurses, medics, and the strain of saving lives. The soft light of the wards. You enter the hospital before dawn, when the world outside is still dim with smoke and the windows rattle faintly from the last distant explosions. The corridor lights glow softly, muted under shaded lamps to avoid drawing attention from the sky. The air smells of antiseptic, damp wool, and something metallic lingering from the night's emergencies. A nurse moves past you, walking briskly but quietly. Her shoes make almost no sound. Her hands, though trembling with fatigue, are steady. She carries not just bandages and medicine, but the weight of every life she's touched tonight. In a ward down the hall, cots are arranged in neat rows. Most are occupied, some by men still half covered in dust, some by women with small burns on their arms from pulling relatives out of collapsed rooms, some by wardens, firefighters, railway workers, factory hands, faces marked with smoke, eyebrows singed, hands blistered. The nurses glide between them like calm shadows. They adjust blankets, check pulses, offer sips of water, remove shards of glass with tweezers warmed between their palms, speak softly enough to steady breath but never disturb the fragile quiet. You pause in the doorway. A nurse touches a man's forehead with a cloth dipped in warm water. Her voice is nearly a whisper. There now. Steady. Just breathe. Her tenderness feels like a form of resistance, a quiet refusal to let war steal the softness of the human heart. The first wave of casualties. When the bombs fall, the hospitals prepare long before the injured arrive. You picture the matron standing at the nurses' station, clipboard in hand, checking lanterns, stretchers, tools, gloves. The ward sisters gather supplies with disciplined efficiency. Orderlies move tables aside to make room for more cots. A doctor rolls up his sleeves and wipes his glasses on the hem of his shirt. Outside, the engines grow louder. The ground trembles with each blast. And then the first casualties arrive. Stretchers carried by volunteers sway gently through the dim corridor. Bodies covered in soot, faces pale except for streaks where tears washed the dust away. Some groan. Some remain silent. Some clutch another person's clothing even while unconscious, as if refusing to let go of the world. The nurses step forward. The atmosphere transforms. Not frantic, not chaotic, but urgent and focused. A woman with burns on her hands is guided to a basin filled with warm water. A boy with a head wound is placed gently on a cot as his mother collapses into a chair nearby. A man covered in debris, possibly a dock worker, gasps for breath and is given oxygen from a tank that rattles as the valve opens. You watch a nurse take his hand, her thumb brushing over his knuckles, anchoring him to something human amid the pain. This is the invisible front. This is where war becomes flesh and blood. The triage in the night. There are moments in the Blitz when hospitals become islands, floating in darkness, surrounded by fire, illuminated only by lanterns, powered by courage rather than electricity. You see it now, a makeshift triage area set up in the hospital basement. The walls are bare brick. Pipes run overhead. Water drips into buckets from cracked joints. The floor trembles faintly with each distant detonation. A doctor stands under a single bulb, examining the injured as they arrive. His voice is quiet, his gestures precise, his decisions swift. This one to surgery. This one needs morphine. This one, sit him there, keep him warm, watch his breathing. Get her upstairs as soon as there's room. A nurse writes notes in a trembling hand. Another prepares bandages. Another checks wounds with the practiced calm of someone who has seen too much but still refuses to look away. You see a teenage girl on a stretcher, hair matted with dust, breathing shallowly. A nurse kneels beside her, brushing debris from her forehead. She speaks softly, introducing herself, asking the girl's name even though she knows the girl cannot answer. Names matter. They make the suffering personal, not statistical. The nurse keeps talking anyway, her voice steady and warm, because sometimes a voice is the only medicine that reaches the frightened heart. The surgeons of the blackout night. In the operating theatre, the blackout curtains turn the windows into silent walls. The room glows with the cold, steady light of shaded lamps. Surgeons bend over their patients like sculptors of fragile clay. Their tools glint faintly. Their gloves are damp with sweat. Their masks cling to their cheeks. Their breaths create small clouds on the inside of their visors. A young nurse stands at the foot of the table, holding the patient's foot gently in both hands to keep the body steady. Another hands instruments with quiet precision. A third monitors the slow rise and fall of the chest. You watch one surgeon pause, close his eyes for half a second, and steady himself before making the next incision. Not because he doubts, but because he cares so much that each action needs to be perfect. Scalpels cut. Clamps click. Blood beads. Sutures pull. Breaths hitch. Lives hang by threads. And yet the room feels almost peaceful, as if this place stands outside the war, untouched by the chaos above. This is bravery without spectacle, a war fought with hands, not weapons. The nurses who never leave their posts. Outside the operating room, the wards overflow. Cots line hallways. Blankets are stacked on windowsills. Patients whisper in the dim light. A nurse moves between them with a calmness that seems impossible at this hour. Her hair is pinned tightly. Her uniform is smudged with soot. Her posture remains upright. She checks pulses with warm fingertips. She replaces bandages. She cleans wounds with gentle care. She whispers words of comfort no one else hears clearly. You watch her pause beside an elderly man with a broken ankle. She kneels to adjust his splint. He winces. "I know," she murmurs. "I know, love." Nearly done. When she stands, her knees crack audibly. She ignores the pain. Down the hall, another nurse sings softly to a crying child, a lullaby that her own mother used to sing. The melody floats through the corridor like a thin thread of light in the dark. In the far ward, a nurse reads letters aloud to those too injured to hold paper. Old letters from sons abroad, from daughters evacuated to the countryside, from husbands serving at sea. Her voice doesn't tremble, but her eyes shine. Nurses do not simply treat injuries. They hold the emotional weight of entire rooms, and they do it night after night, without rest, without recognition, without the luxury of breaking. The ambulance crews of the burning streets. Beyond the hospital walls, another kind of healer moves through the city. The ambulance drivers and first aid volunteers. You picture them navigating streets still smoking from the night's raids, steering around craters, dodging fallen debris, calling out into collapsed houses, lifting survivors through shattered doorways. Inside the ambulances, the air smells of diesel and antiseptic. A volunteer holds pressure on a wound with one hand and braces herself with the other as the vehicle jolts over rubble. You see a driver, a woman in her 40s, guiding her ambulance through a narrow alley lit only by the fire's glow. Her face is set with determination. Her knuckles whiten on the wheel. She stops beside a collapsed shop. A warden waves her closer. Two firefighters carry a man toward her, his body limp, his breath shallow. She doesn't ask questions. She simply lowers the stretcher ramp and prepares the blankets. This is the invisible choreography of survival, a chain of hands from rubble to hospital bed, moving in rhythm against destruction. The dawn rounds. As the first pale light enters the sky, the hospital quiets. Patients sleep, exhausted. A few murmur in dreams shaped by fire. Some wake in confusion, startled by the stillness. Nurses make their rounds in calm, steady steps. They move like guardians of the fragile morning. One checks dressings with soft fingers. Another adjusts pillows. Another pours warm water into a basin so a woman can wash her hands for the first time since being rescued. You see a nurse pause beside a window, looking out at the smoke curling above the rooftops. Her eyes are tired, far older than her years, but when she turns back to her work, her expression softens. There are more patients waiting. There is always more to do, and she will be ready. You watch as a nurse steps into a quiet ward, carrying a lantern that glows like a small sun. She moves between the beds, checking each patient with hands that refuse to lose their gentleness, even after a night shaped by destruction. Outside, the city smolders. Inside, she lights the room with something stronger than fire, the quiet resilience of someone who chooses to save lives, even when the world is breaking around her. This is the invisible front, hands healing what bombs try to take, voices soothing what fear tries to fracture, hearts steady in a war with no front lines, and they will do it again tonight. Chapter 8. Waiting Through the Dark. The Psychology of Fear fatigue and hope. The hours that stretch and shudder. You're sitting on a wooden bench in a shelter crowded with quiet bodies. The air feels thick, warm in some places, cool in others, carrying the strange smell of damp wool, metal tins, and tired breath. A lantern glows above you, its weak light trembling every time a distant explosion rolls through the earth. Time changes down here. Minutes stretch. Seconds pulse. Hours lose their edges. At first, people talk to pass the time. Soft murmurs drift around you. Did you hear the one about? I hope the shop wasn't hit. Do you think the fireman? I wonder if. But as the night deepens, voices fade. Silence grows like frost on glass. Fear does strange things in this quiet. It sharpens some senses while dulling others. It makes the heartbeat loud. It makes the breath shallow. It blurs the border between imagination and reality. You sit with the others, feeling the tension settle into your shoulders like a weight made of dust. Every vibration from above feels personal, as though the earth is trembling directly beneath your feet. You're not in danger, not yet, but fear is not rational. Fear is anticipation. Fear is waiting for the next sound. Fear is listening harder than you've ever listened. This is the psychology of the Blitz, a city living in the pause between impacts. How fear moves through a room. Fear is contagious, subtle in its spread, quiet in its arrival. You watch a woman clasp her hands tightly, knuckles pale. Then the man beside her straightens, as though to make himself stronger for her sake. A child hides her face in her mother's coat. Two teenagers grow suddenly silent, exchanging glances they don't want adults to see. Fear moves in glances, in breaths, in stiffened shoulders. But, strangely, so does courage. A warden steps into the shelter and smiles. Gently, wearily, but sincerely, and his presence shifts the atmosphere like a fresh wind. People sit up a little straighter. A child uncovers her face. A woman exhales slowly. Courage is contagious too. Under the earth, fear and bravery dance together in strange rhythms, one rising, the other answering, never cancelling each other out, only balancing the scales of the night. You learn something important in moments like this. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing your next breath despite it. Fatigue as a landscape. Blitz fatigue is not simple exhaustion. It's an entire landscape carved into the body. People move through it every day, eyes rimmed with grey, hands trembling slightly, shoulders slumped but still upright. You see fatigue in small gestures, the way a woman rubs her temples, the way a man stares into nothing for too long, the way children fall asleep sitting upright, heads bobbing gently with each tremor of the shelter. And beneath every face lies the same truth. Sleep is no longer rest. Sleep is an escape that must be earned between sirens. Families crawl into bed at dawn, clothes smelling of dust and damp earth, ears still ringing with phantom echoes. They sleep lightly, a kind of half-conscious drift where the body collapses but the mind keeps watch. In buses, people doze with chins resting on their coats. In queues, women lean against walls with eyes half closed. In factories, workers blink repeatedly to keep from dropping a wrench. Fatigue becomes a second skin. And yet, London moves. Somehow, impossibly, it moves. The city runs on determination more than energy, on stubbornness more than strength. This is the psychology of survival. Not triumph, but endurance. The quiet turning point of panic. Inside the shelter, a sudden blast lands nearer than the others. The ground shakes visibly. Dust drifts from the ceiling. A lantern swings hard enough to send shadows flailing across the walls. You feel the panic ripple. It always begins with breath. A gasp. A tightening of shoulders. Someone whispering, "Too close, too close." For a moment, panic threatens the room. An invisible wave rising, leaning, about to break. Then something gentle cuts through it. A woman in her 60s begins humming. Softly, slowly, almost shyly. The tune drifts through the air like a thread pulling a torn fabric together. A mother picks it up. A man joins quietly. A child hums off-key but sincerely. The panic retreats. Not because the danger has passed, but because people remind each other how to breathe. Fear narrows the world, but music widens it again. Even one soft note can give the mind a place to rest. The strange comfort of routine. Routine becomes a psychological shield. You see it everywhere. People folding blankets the same way each night, checking their watches even when time feels meaningless, carrying the same tin mug to the shelter, wearing the same coat, lighting the same lantern. These tiny rituals provide order when the world outside has none. A woman always pours tea for her elderly neighbor. A man always brings extra gloves for those who forget theirs. A child always counts the footsteps between the stairs and the bench. Someone always arranges the benches so they face the same direction. These repeated actions anchor the mind, transforming fear into something familiar, manageable, almost domestic. The Blitz creates chaos. People counter it with pattern. Even routine whispers hope. If I'm doing this again, it means I survived yesterday. Hope in impossible places. Hope is the most surprising thing you find in a shelter. Not loud hope, not patriotic slogans or bold speeches. Small hope, quiet hope. Hope woven into the smallest gestures. A woman offering half her last biscuit to a stranger. A man sharpening a pencil for a child so she can keep drawing. A teenager reading aloud from a worn book to steady his younger brother. A mother brushing soot from her daughter's hair with slow, gentle strokes. Hope appears not in grand declarations, but in careful, ordinary kindness. A warden enters with news of the fire crew's progress. Nothing dramatic, just enough to lift a corner of the night. Dock fires under control. North Woolwich is quiet now. St. Paul's is still standing. People nod, absorbing the hope like warmth. The Blitz tries to collapse the mind inward. Hope keeps it outward, toward others, toward morning, toward the next breath. Sometimes hope is not belief. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to despair. The long exhale of dawn. At last, after hours that felt like days, the all-clear rises faintly above the rooftops. It begins like a sigh, a long, slow, rising tone that pulls shoulders downward and releases tension from the body like steam from a kettle. The shelter shifts. People stand, stretch, blink into the lantern's fading light. But it is not excitement you feel, nor relief. It is the heaviness of survival. The mind reconnects to the world above with caution, knowing that the night has rewritten something, that the home may or may not still stand, that the street may look different, that the city is wounded again. Yet people climb the steps anyway, faces pale, eyes swollen with fatigue, breaths deep. They go to see what morning has left them. This is the psychology of hope, knowing the world might be broken, and going up to meet it anyway. You stand just outside the shelter entrance, breathing smoke-tinged morning air, watching the street fill with people emerging into the fragile light. Their steps are slow, but steady, their faces weary, but open, their hearts bruised, but still beating. Fear, fatigue, hope, all of them walking side by side, in the bodies of ordinary people. This is what waiting through the dark truly looks like. A quiet battle waged in breath and silence, in trembling hands and steady footsteps, in the fragile, unbreakable human mind. And another night will come, and they will endure that too. Chapter 9. When daylight returned, the aftermath, the rubble, and the resolve of a city. The first light after the fire. You step out of the shelter just as dawn begins to form, not as a bright sunrise, but as a thin, hesitant glow pressing through a haze of smoke. The air is strange at this hour, heavy, warm in pockets, cold in others, carrying the scent of burned timber, wet stone, and dust that clings to your tongue. The street is unrecognizable. Where yesterday stood rows of soot-streaked brick houses, there are now mounds of rubble, piles of shattered tile, splintered window frames, uprooted chimneys lying sideways like fallen monuments. A lamp-post leans at a hopeless angle. A bicycle, bent in half, rests on its side. A kettle lies in the road, dented, its lid missing. The world is altered, and yet, somehow, painfully familiar. You watch as the first people emerge, blinking into the morning. Children held by the hand, women with shawls over their hair, men with faces carved by fatigue. They walk slowly, as if afraid that moving too quickly might reveal something worse. This is the first ritual of daylight after a raid, the quiet accounting of what remains. The city redrawn in debris. London in daylight is a city redrawn by the night. You walk along a street where every step crunches on broken glass, a sound so common now it barely registers. Soot covers every surface like black snow. Wooden beams jut from collapsed roofs like ribs from a half-buried skeleton, and people move among it all with astonishing calm. A woman sweeps her doorstep, even though there is no longer a door. A man picks up bricks one by one, stacking them neatly as if preparing for builders. Two boys gather fallen slates, their pockets stuffed with nails and fragments, treasures of survival. You see a fireman leaning against a hydrant, helmet under his arm, eyes distant. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence says everything about the night. A milkman pushes his cart down the street, bottles rattling softly. He pauses to hand a bottle to a family standing outside what used to be their home. "No charge today," he murmurs. It's a small gesture, barely audible, but it's enough to make the woman's eyes fill. You notice these moments everywhere. A neighbor offering blankets, another offering a bucket of water, someone passing a loaf of bread through a broken window frame. The city is not defeated. It is rearranged, roughly, painfully, but held together by invisible threads of kindness. The digging, the searching, the hoping. Some parts of the city are quiet tragedies. You walk into a courtyard where a rescue crew is still sifting through rubble. Their boots kick up clouds of dust. They move with slow precision, lifting beams, rolling bricks aside, listening for any sound beneath. A warden stands nearby, clipboard in hand, marking names. With a kind of reverence, a young man suddenly calls out. Not loud, not hopeful, just a steady signal to his team. They gather around a collapsed basement. A moment passes. Another. Then, a faint noise. Someone shifts a beam. Another leans closer. A voice. Weak, hoarse, but alive. The rescuers move with renewed energy. Careful, deliberate, as if handling fragile glass. Minutes feel like hours. But eventually a woman is lifted out, covered in dust, eyes blinking into daylight that feels brighter than anything she remembers. People around her quietly applaud. Not loud, not triumphant, just warm, grateful, exhausted claps. You realize then how deeply daylight matters, not just for visibility, but because it allows hope to breathe. The faces of those who lost everything. But not every street has miracles. You turn a corner into an emptiness that feels heavier than rubble. A house stands with only one wall intact, a child's wallpaper visible, a lone cupboard still hanging sideways from its hinge, and beside it stands a family, silent. A mother holds her daughter's hand, eyes fixed on the ruin as if willing it to return to form. A father stands slightly behind, one hand covering his mouth, shoulders trembling in tiny waves he tries to hide. A neighbor approaches. A quiet exchange. A nod. A blanket draped over the child's shoulders. Someone brings tea. Someone else brings news. A warden writes notes on a clipboard and speaks in a gentle tone. But there is a kind of grief no clipboard can help. No words can soften. You watch as the mother kneels and picks up a single object from the ruins, a small ceramic figurine, its dress chipped but recognizable. She presses it to her chest. For a moment, she closes her eyes. Holding onto something, even a fragment, makes the loss easier to name. The city that refuses to stop. Despite the devastation, London tries to move. Shops hang signs reading, "Open if you can find a way in." Families salvage tables and chairs, placing them outside intact rooms, to create temporary kitchens or bedrooms. Factory whistles blow, though muffled, calling workers to shifts that must continue. If the war is to be endured, a bus rattles past with its windows boarded and its roof patched with tin. Children climb onto it wearing coats too big for them, heading to schools relocated in church basements. A barber sets a chair outside his damaged shop, brushing debris off the seat with a rag. Customers line up, laughing softly, as if a haircut were a luxury that could mend more than hair. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, there is sweeping. Women sweep glass from pavements. Men sweep doorsteps. Children sweep the roads in front of their homes. Sweeping is not just cleaning. It is reclaiming space. It is saying, "This is still our street." Civilization rebuilt in brush strokes. The memorials without names. Some losses cannot be swept away. You see a makeshift memorial on a wall of cracked plaster, a bouquet of singed flowers, a photograph taped beside it, a note scrawled in pencil. We will find each other again. These shrines appear across the city, tucked into doorways, placed beside lamp-posts, left on piles of rubble where homes once stood. People pause to touch them. Some bow their heads. Some close their eyes for a moment. Grief is quiet in wartime, but it gathers like mist, soft, heavy, everywhere. No one weeps loudly. No one collapses. The grief of the Blitz is held inward, in tightened throats and red-rimmed eyes, in the way people move with gentleness, so as not to break further. This is mourning without ceremony. This is remembrance without rest. The resolve that grows from ashes. By afternoon, the city begins to sound like itself again. Not fully, never fully, but enough to remind you that life continues. A baker opens her oven. Once the ash is cleared, the warm smell of bread drifts through the broken street, like a promise. Children laugh as they chase a rolling tin can. Men climb ladders to hammer planks into broken frames. Women scrub soot from windowsills that survived the night. And everywhere, the same phrase passes from mouth to mouth. We carry on. It's not bravado. It's not cheerfulness. It's determination. A quiet, unshakable resolve, woven into the breath of every person you pass. A resolve to rebuild, to protect one another, to greet morning even when night has been cruel. You stand at the edge of a bomb crater, watching a group of neighbors shovel dirt from its edges, turning the wound of the earth into something manageable, something reparable. London is not unscathed, but London is unbroken. The city moves not because it is strong, but because its people refuse to let it stop. As evening approaches again, a faint golden haze settles over the streets. Smoke drifts slowly upward. Birds circle cautiously. A few children play beside the rubble, as though yesterday never happened. You watch a man sweeping his doorstep, slow, rhythmic strokes of the broom, across bricks darkened by fire. Every sweep brushes away a little of the night. Every sweep makes space for morning. This is what daylight after the Blitz truly looks like. A wounded city learning to breathe again, one gesture at a time. Epilogue. Under the slowly clearing sky. You stand at the edge of the city in the early morning hush, where the Thames meets the widening sky and the ruins of the night soften under the pale glow of dawn. The air is cool, touched by the faintest breeze drifting over the water, carrying the sense of smoke, damp stone, and something gentler, something like healing. London lies around you in quiet stillness, not silent, never silent, but subdued. A city that has spent the night holding its breath, now exhaling slowly, painfully, beautifully. You watch as a patch of sunlight pushes through a tear in the clouds. It lands on a row of battered rooftops, some missing tiles, some charred at the edges, yet all standing. A small victory written in brick and shadow. Last night's fires have settled into smouldering pockets, thin tendrils of smoke rising like wandering spirits. From a distance, they look almost peaceful, wisps of memory lifting themselves toward the sky. A fireboat drifts along the river, its engines low and patient, pushing gentle ripples across the water. The ripples touch the charred hull of a barge. and continue on without hesitation. Even the river seems determined to keep moving. Behind you, footsteps echo softly across the pavement. People emerging again. From shelters, from doorways, from the protective darkness of the underground. Their faces hold the same mixture of exhaustion and resolve you've seen in every corner of this city. They walk slowly at first, looking upward as if expecting the sky to rumble again. But the clouds remain still. The morning holds. You find yourself breathing more deeply, letting the dawn settle into your lungs, like a quiet reassurance. For a moment, you see the Blitz as a kind of strange mirror, revealing not just the destruction of a city, but the stubborn endurance of the people who live within it. Men with soot-streaked faces, helping neighbors sort through rubble. Women carrying buckets of water to wash their steps. Children laughing softly as they chase a rolling tin can, the sound almost startling in its purity. London, in these mornings, feels like a wounded animal, lifting itself to its feet. You follow the curve of the river with your eyes, until you reach the distant outline of St. Paul's. Its dome rises unbroken against the clearing sky, a symbol held upright not by luck, but by the hands of countless firefighters, who refused to let the night claim it. The memory of their silhouettes moves through you like a quiet wave. It's strange how the darkest nights reveal the most luminous forms of courage, not always dramatic, often quiet, often unseen. A nurse kneeling beside a cot, her hands steady despite the tremor in her breath. A warden guiding strangers through smoke-thick alleys. A family sheltering together under a roof of corrugated steel. Hands intertwined, hearts steadying one another. These are the moments that carried the city through the falling sky. Moments small in scale, enormous in meaning. You close your eyes for a moment, and imagine those who survived the night, sitting around tables once more, sharing bread, mending clothes, telling stories, in voices hoarse from smoke and fear. Imagine them sweeping glass from doorsteps, patching blackout curtains, lifting one another's spirits, with simple, steady acts of care. Imagine them standing at their thresholds, as evening returns, listening for the sirens, preparing once again to endure the dark. Because the Blitz was not one night, it was many, a long season of uncertainty, in which daylight became a fragile blessing, and nightfall a test repeated endlessly. And yet London endured, not because its buildings were strong, but because its people were. You open your eyes again as the sun lifts higher, casting long beams across the river. The smoke glows gold in the new light. Birds begin to circle, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. As the sky clears inch by inch, a woman nearby brushes ash from her coat and lifts her child into her arms. A man smooths the soot from his hat and places it squarely on his head. Two neighbors meet eyes over a broken fence and exchange weary nods, a recognition of shared survival. The day is beginning in earnest now. Shops will reopen where walls still stand. Factories will hum again despite broken windows. Fire crews will patrol the smoldering ruins. Wardens will prepare for another night. And life, fragile and determined, will inch its way forward, through the rubble of the hours that came before. You take one more breath, a long, quiet inhale of river air, cool and smoky, filled with the weight of memory and the promise of morning. The worst nights leave scars on a city, but daylight invites reflection, a gentle reminder that every sunrise is an act of defiance against whatever tried to break the world in the dark. As the sky clears above you, you feel the story settle into its final shape, not a tale of destruction, but a meditation on endurance, on tenderness, on the quiet bravery threaded through ordinary days, and you realize something simple and profound. The Blitz was not just a battle fought in the air. It was a battle fought in the hearts of those who stayed, those who swept their steps, cooked breakfast over camp stoves, held each other in shelters, patched roofs with trembling hands, and returned to their windows each morning to greet a sky that had not been kind, but was still faithfully there. The sky slowly clears, the river keeps flowing, and London breathes again. You've been part of echoes of war, where stories rise on quiet wings, and the past still circles above us, refusing to land.